This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones. This is episode number 2 of Deep Cuts. This is Jason Jones Show, Saturday special, Deep Cuts, where I don't have any sponsors. And I get to talk about whatever I want with whoever I want. And today, we're going to be talking to Matt Lobod, a dear friend of mine who went through something that every parent dreads. He lost his daughter. She drowned. That's the sorrow of it. But there is a miracle. The miracle is after an hour, her heart began to beat again thanks to his hard work with CPR and then the medical staff at the hospital where his daughter was rushed to. But he put his daughter with no heartbeat into the arms of a paramedic who drove her to the hospital. But then after an hour, her heart began to beat. And then after 31 days in the hospital, she went home. And then today, after just getting a cognitive skills test, there was no permanent damage. And it really is a miracle. And the reason I want to have Matt on is, first of all, I've always, as a Christian, as someone who didn't become a Christian until I was in my 30s, the problem of pain. How could there be an all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful God when bad things happen in the world? And nothing is worse than losing a child. It's interesting that as a Christian, at the very center of our religion is a God the Father who loses his child, God the Son. It's at the very heart of our religion. So the great obstacle to faith is embedded in the very mystery of the Trinity and the incarnation and atonement. And it's quite the mystery. But the reason I decided to have Matt on today, because I've been wanting to have him on for quite some time to share his story, is because a dear friend of mine from the Army, Carl Bevins, his nephew is now in the hospital after falling into a puddle. His heart stopped beating. And then after, I believe, about an hour, little Asher was, his heart began to beat again. And now he is in the middle of the same battle, little Asher Bevins, as Joy Lobod was in a couple of years ago. And so I'm doing this show for 2 reasons. One is for all of us. We have to grapple with the problem of pain. We need to think about these things. And then we need to really be prepared to stand with others when they suffer. And I want to stand with my family and friends. And I want to stand with Carl now. So in the show notes, we're going to have the Caring Bridge where you can donate to support Asher's family. He is his father's an entertainer who traveled the country with Wicked. Of course, because of COVID now, he's not working. And so we want to help his family. We want to stand with them. And we want to talk about this beautiful miracle and the problem of pain. My dear friend, Matt Lobod. This is the Deep Cut special, Saturday special of the Jason Jones Show. Check out, of course, Movie to Movement, Divided Hearts of America. Go to the Vulnerable People's Project, thegreatcampaign.org. If you want a free copy of What It Means to Be Human by Carter Sneed, any donation that we receive this month, $20 or more, you're going to get a free copy of What It Means to Be Human. Wall Street Journal called it one of the top books of 2020. I think it's one of the most powerful books I've ever read. It is one of the most powerful books I've ever read. And one of the things Carter talks about there is the virtue of misericordia. Did not know what that word meant. He told me it means to walk with people when they suffer. So I believe him. And I think that is that's really a beautiful way to live your life, is we need to walk with those we love, especially when they suffer. This is a Deep Cut special, the Jason Jones Show. Here we go. Matt Lobod on the beautiful miracle of joy. Matt Lobod, welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
Thanks, Jason. Aloha.
Aloha. So the first time we met was in the great state of Hawaii, wasn't it?
That's true. in the beautiful state of Hawaii.
What did we do? We did some touring. I think we did some tourist stuff together. What did we do?
Well, we did. Well, I landed and I texted you. We had not met. Chris Stewart put us in touch with one another, and you were working out just right down the road from my hotel, and we went and we got noodles somewhere.
We went and
You
got
remember that?
noodles. Yeah, you know, my favorite thing in the world is to go do Muay Thai and then have some pad Thai or some ramen with Coca-Cola. So that's probably what we did, I'm guessing.
That's exactly what you got was ramen with a Coca-Cola, and then you told me how you shut your kidneys down because you worked out so hard.
Oh, a couple months before that, right?
Yeah, I was like, this guy's a maniac. That was our first meeting.
Or I just have really bad kidneys. I've gotten exertional rhabdomyolysis twice. Yeah, it's the bane of my existence. But so,
I
brother,
can't even
this
say
is
that.
Yeah, either can I. I didn't even know what it was. They're like, you have exertional rhabdomyolysis, and I said, wow. I thought I was a goner. It sounded pretty bad, and but it's not. You know, I mean, it can be very bad. But this is my second deep cut Saturday special. What I want to do on Saturdays is pick a topic that's pretty deep, and go deep. You know, go to the depths of the topic. And I can't imagine a topic deeper than this one. I want to begin by saying it's a miracle, and there's a happy ending. And I think when we first met, I said to you when you shared with me what we're about to talk about, the day you found your daughter dead, I said, you know, the experience you went through, the only one of the blessings of this story is you will be able to comfort other parents who go through similar experiences. Because only when you share an experience like you had finding your daughter, only someone who experienced what you experienced, you can only talk to, you know, when you have a great tragedy, like if you lose your child to a drunk driver, you can only talk to somebody else about it who went through it, or they don't know what's going on in your mind, and you don't even want to hear from them, right? And then this past week, a good friend of mine from the Army called me and said that his cousin found his nephew face down in a pond, drowned. And then I thought, I have to have Matt on the show. I've been wanting to have you on the show because I wanted you to talk to them and give them hope, because what you experienced, the miracle of your daughter coming back to life and being healthy, is what I'm praying happens for my friend. So I thought, this happens quite a bit. In fact, we purchased, when we were looking for houses, we're like, we don't want a pool. Can you share with us, first of all, what happened and sort of your background and the background with your wife? You know, you have strong faith. Both of you come from very strong Catholic families that may have prepared you for this, but tell us what happened.
Sure. You know, Jason, I'm not sure if anything could prepare you for possibly losing a child or losing a child. I mean, that's probably the greatest fear any parent has, is to outlive their children. But we were living in Tampa at the time, and Tampa, Florida, that is, on a beautiful island right on the bay. And my in-laws, they moved to Phoenix, Arizona. So in 2017, December, we took a family vacation out for Christmas, and we were there for a couple of days. My wife and I, one of our presents from my in-laws was that we could get away for an afternoon and evening, which when you have 5 kids, that's more than welcome. So we went away, went to a nice restaurant, stayed at a nice hotel. We were supposed to be back the next day by 2, because my mother-in-law had an engagement. We had to take back over charge of the children. And I woke up early and I was praying, and I just had this notion, this sense that I was supposed to return back to the house early. So when my wife woke up, we had breakfast. I said, I really think we're supposed to go back to the house early. And so we went back, and we were gathering the children up to go to Chick-fil-A because they were all starving. We got back around 11. And my wife went in the house to do her makeup and get ready. I had the children. We were playing frisbee golf. The property that we were on, my father-in-law's property, was about 2.5 acres large, and so pretty vast and sprawling. And my youngest daughter, Joy, was 17 months at the time, and I called her my clinger because everywhere I went, she was either holding my hand or she was clinging to my leg as I walked. And we were playing frisbee golf, and I looked down. Joy was there, and then she wasn't. And immediately I had this deep fear. There was a lot of people around, a lot of kids, aunts and uncles, but I just was deeply alarmed. And we all started looking for her frantically on the property. My mind immediately went to the koi pond. I thought that's the danger zone. So I ran down there and ran around it like 4 times. And after I scoured the area, I thought, okay, everything's fine. She's fine. And then the best way I could tell you, Jason, is the Holy Spirit told me to run to the pool. I didn't think of the pool because the pool was gated off. And so I sprinted over there. And as I turned the corner, I saw my daughter Joy floating in the pool, submersed. I was absolutely horrified. And so I sprinted up, and Jason, you know me, I'm not the skinniest guy around. I got this large body to just scale or jump right over, clear this fence, 5-foot fence. I dove in the pool, retrieved her, got her out, and she was frozen, lifeless, limp in my arms, and I started CPR on her.
That's every parent's dread. It's been such my dread that from the moment I became a Christian, I read every book I can on the problem of pain because it's so hard for me to even begin to understand how to grapple with something like this happening to your child. And I want to, even though it's never happened to me, well, I guess in a way it has. But I can't imagine. It's the worst. Just thinking of it makes you shudder. And there you actually experienced. Now, if you didn't know CPR, this is sort of like a PSA, there would have been no hope for Joy, right? So by the grace of God, you knew CPR.
Yeah, back in my day growing up, I was a competitive swimmer and a lifeguard, and all those instincts just kicked back in, just like that. And I started CPR on her, and it was, to say that it was dark or deafening really limps for words. It was absolute terror that I was experiencing. And my daughter Joy, she blonde hair, big, beautiful blue eyes, and her eyes were open as I was giving her CPR, and I could literally see her pupils shrinking, and they shrunk to a pin drop as I was giving her CPR. Now, in that moment, I should have been yelling, screaming, every type of word possible in the human dictionary. But by the grace of God, my mind went to Aramaic, and I started yelling out Talitha Kum, which means little girl, I say to you, arise. You remember that story from Jesus in the Gospels when the girl's sleeping and he goes and says, little girl, I say to you, arise, in Aramaic. And that wasn't working. Then I started yelling out.
How did you know that phrase in Aramaic?
Well, I've been a Christian my whole life, a Catholic, and I've studied the scriptures. I was blessed. I studied theology in college. After college, I was actually a Franciscan monk for 4 years. Discerned out of that. So I've had a discipline in my life to pray through the scriptures and really get familiar with the life of Jesus. So while I knew it, even to this day, thinking back on it, it's like that was the Holy Spirit working through me, because I shouldn't have been thinking Aramaic. And then after we continued CPR, I started yelling for the Ruha, which is Hebrew for the breath of God, to return to her, because I literally thought my daughter is dead and I need a miracle.
And by God's grace, you got a miracle.
I did.
So walk us through now. Where was your wife?
So my wife heard the commotion. She came out. She was searching. She was stuck on the other side of the fence of the pool gate. She couldn't get in. And she was terror stricken. And she just had to stand there and watch me and my brother-in-law give CPR to my daughter Joy. Time is elusive during those types of moments. I don't know if it was 3 minutes or 5 minutes, but there was a detective after someone called 911. There was a detective that was right down the road from us. He came. His name's Ron. Wonderful man. He came and he encouraged me to continue CPR. He said usually he would take over, but everything was going by the books, and so he just encouraged me to keep on going. And then the ambulance and the firefighters showed up, and Ron is a big beastly man. He picked up Joy and sprinted her across the property, giving her CPR. And when he said to me, "I need to take your daughter," I remember lifting Joy up and handing her to him, and I was just stricken by the moment. And he took her over to the ambulance. They started working on her. She still had no heartbeat. Even though I was giving her CPR, I was not able to get a heartbeat come back. I sprinted to the ambulance and I put my hand into the ambulance through the door, and I prayed for God's blessing upon all the paramedics that were working on her. It's fascinating, Jason, because the head paramedic, Patrick, said he felt a sense of heat come through the ambulance, and he turned around and he saw me praying with my hand extended. And it was cold that day. It was probably 50 degrees. The water temperature was freezing. It was cold, desert cold. And he gave testimony to that. So God was all around. At that moment, though, Jason, we were in the ambulance. The fire truck was parked in front of us. And my wife, in the chaos of the situation, must have been confused as to where Joy exactly was. And I looked over, and still to this day, other than the visual of Joy being dead, laying on the ground of the pool, I looked over. This was so just devastating. I saw my wife. She was kneeling at the fire truck, pounding on it, and this yell, scream that I've never heard before from an earthly human being. She was just pleading for her child, for her baby's life. They took us. They said they had to go to the hospital, so the detectives rounded us up.
Were they able to get her heartbeat before they pulled away with the paddles?
No, they still weren't able to get a heartbeat. And the detectives got us in their car and said they were going to drive us down to the hospital, which is just a few minutes away, Phoenix Children's Hospital. And the detective said, "We're going to the best place we could possibly go on the West Coast." And I said, "Thank you, God." And I was shivering because I just dove into this pool and I was frozen. I was holding my wife's hand, and I had this really grace-filled prayer with the Heavenly Father. I closed my eyes. There's so much going on, Jason. All I can just really tell you in plain, simple terms is I felt like as if I was like taken up, and I said to the Father, I was in his throne room, and I said, "Father, I know she's your daughter, but she's mine too. And now is not the time." And then my wife just squeezed my hand, and I opened my eyes, and I still was unsure. I thought we were going to get there, and they were going to tell us that she was dead. They put us into a holding room. We were there for 30 minutes. And then I've done a lot of chaplaincy work before in hospitals. And first, the police officer came in, and then a chaplain came in, and I just thought, this is really bad. And the counselor came in, and I said, "No doctor's coming in. This is really bad." And finally, a doctor came in, and he knelt down, and he said some things, which I don't remember. And then he said what I wanted to hear. He said, "Your daughter has a heartbeat. It's not good, but she has a heartbeat." At that point, I just wanted to jump out of my seat and say, that's all I needed to hear. But I knew we had a long road to go. They took us up to the intensive care. Joy was put into an induced coma. And thank God that the paramedics Thank God that the ER, they didn't give up on her, because when you add it all together, we can get into the 40, 45-minute range of her not having a heartbeat. And with their diligent and hard work, they did not give up, and they got a heartbeat back, and she was in a coma. And I knew we were in for a ride, because I asked one of the doctors how long we were gonna, like, what the scenario was, and he said, "You're gonna be in the hospital for 6 to 9 months if she lives." And then quickly after that, I was taken into like a holding room, and I was questioned by a police officer and a social worker about the circumstances of the drowning, which was very trying. But so that was the beginning of our journey.
What struck me about that story is, God bless doctors and lawyers and firemen and they have to be with us in these challenging times. But what struck me about your story is that he knelt down to tell you. You were sitting down, and he got to beneath your eye level. That's something right there. It's a sign of empathy. So many times these doctors are overworked, and it becomes the tragedy is routine. But here is this emergency room doctor who comes in, and he gets beneath your eye line to tell you this. Now, when we were with the CFRs, you did chaplaincy work, were you ever in the room when parents were told that their child had died in the past? Is that how you knew that the doctor not coming in would be a bad sign? How did you know that?
Yeah, when I was with the CFRs, I have a heart for the vulnerable and the suffering, especially children. So I befriended a lot of families. One in particular comes to mind. They were always in the hospital. Their little girl Teresa was so sick. And she's always having procedures and surgeries. And so I was with them a lot. And then I would go around up and down the hallways and, greet the families and say hello and pray with them. So, so that's how I knew that everything wasn't looking that great.
Now, you said it was going to take, well, now we're still in the first 45 minutes. We have a faint heartbeat. How long was it from that faint heartbeat till you knew you were out of the woods, that Joy was going to live?
That we were out of the woods was probably a week. I think Joy was in a coma for 9 days.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. So it was probably about 9 days. And my prayer then, once she had a heartbeat, turned to, Father, I know she's going to live, and I know she's going to flourish. And the doctors were rightly concerned about brain damage, residual effects from going so long without a heartbeat, oxygen deprivation. And on top of it, Joy has this genetic disorder, blood disorder that I have. It's called factor V. It's a clotting disorder. And God bless the paramedics.
I'm sorry, what? I didn't get that. What's it called?
It's called factor V Leiden's disorder.
Okay.
And so your body just throws clots for no reason. And then if there's acute trauma, it throws clots very quickly. So the paramedics try to put a line into her femoral artery, and they pierced the artery, and that was enough impact to throw a clot. So after day one of being in the hospital and Joy being in a coma, the doctors rushed in and they said, we have to take Joy to surgery right now, or she's going to lose her leg, because the blood clot had gotten so big it stopped all the distal movement to the bottom of her leg. So my wife, in great faith, reached out, grabbed the doctor's hands. We prayed with him, and they took her into surgery. They had to cut open her leg in like 4 different spots to get to the artery, remove the clot, patch up the artery. And so there was a lot of, I remember at that point, I was like, Lord, I don't know how much more I could take, because it just pure exhaustion hits you after all that adrenaline rush. Granted, me and Kristen, we had 4 kids back at my in-laws' house that needed to be taken care of, loved for, and loved on during that time, because they had all seen Joy on the poolside as well, so they were quite afraid as well.
And so this you said 9 days before you knew you were out of the woods. In that time, you're going to and from the hospital. Are you allowed to sleep in the hospital? Where are you sleeping?
Yeah, so we originally thought, Kristen and I, that this is going to be a long road. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So we were going to take turns sleeping over at the hospital so we could take care of the kids and love on them. And then after the second day, Jason, I just had this intuition that Joy needed Kristen and Kristen needed Joy, and Kristen and I spoke, and Kristen stayed over at the hospital pretty much every day, every night after that. And I would go home and I would love on our other four and take care of them and have really deep and profound conversations. As you can imagine, there were so many questions, difficult questions that the other kids have. Would Joy live? Would they ever see her again? Is she going to be happy in heaven? Is she going to be able to walk again? Can she talk? All these different things. And it was really hard to answer them. But every night I would lay down on the bed, we would say our prayers, and then we'd have a time where it was open field. Anything went. No question went unanswered, and they could ask anything that they had on their little hearts. And that was a real beautiful, very trying, but beautiful time, because they were able to download in the process everything that was going on in real time. I was trying to, in my best attempt, to eliminate fear from them, even though it was a very fearful situation. I didn't want them repressing and holding in things. I wanted them to let it out and to ask me. So that was a real beautiful moment. And, God bless, Jason, God bless the people of Phoenix, specifically St. Thomas, the Apostle in Phoenix. We were in the hospital, it was like day number 3, and on my phone, a reminder came up that our flight was leaving in an hour. I didn't even realize, we don't even live here, We were supposed to go home. And then I realized the next day the kids were supposed to start school. So we called up the school. They were aware of the situation, and they said, just bring all of your kids to school tomorrow. I got home from the hospital, and we had these garbage bags full of uniforms waiting for us. I don't know about you, but I'm really bad at laundry. They're like sizing the kids up. So I had to have them stand there. I had to go by each kid, putting shirt by shirt, this is your size. We made piles, made drawers. My mother-in-law, God bless her, she helped me so much get the kids ready, and they were troopers. Even to this day, Jason, I still have not heard one of the other 4, Isaiah, Isaac, Grace, or Hope, say something about Joy in a negative way, or wondering why Joy got all this attention, or why it was so joy focused. They were commendable beyond words.
What was the toughest question you got? Do you remember?
Oh, sure. Hope asked me.
How old was she? How old was Hope when she was asking this?
So Hope was 4.
Okay.
And she asked me, she said, is Joy going to have wings when she gets to heaven? And that one just really got me. Still gets me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, think about this. When I'm hearing your story, as hard as it is, I hear all of the beautiful things. It's your in-laws. You have a parish community. You have a relationship where you can sit down at night in bed with your children and talk. And there are families that go through this that are broken, that there's just a mom or just a dad. And the parent, they don't have an extended community, or they're not in a parish or church community. And it is really sad that we've been stripped naked. We've been stripped, all of us, left alone. So many of us left alone. And those of us who have large families, extended, that we know are aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, that we have a parish community, not a place where we go to Mass on Sundays, but that you have a parish community, that your neighbors, all of these things that were just sort of buried in that story of yours, they're what made this survivable, right? Could you imagine doing this if you and your wife had been divorced? If you didn't have a good relationship with your in-laws, if you didn't believe in God, and what would you tell your children without a faith? What would you do if you didn't have an extended parish community? How hard would all of this become? It'd become impossible. And so those of us, we're blessed to have families. We're blessed to have, community. And so right there's the grace even within all of this tragedy, right, that's surrounding you.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's one of those things too, Jason, where it's like you're surrounded by this love and tangible grace all the time. You know, God's continuously working and moving in and through us, all around us. Then there's moments though that where, you know, like St. Paul had those scales fall from his eyes, and you know he could see again when after he was blinded. You know, that was one of the moments where like the scales, like I just saw love all around us, and even the doctors, just fabulous people. Jason, I am so grateful for them and the nurses, even the nice Haitian woman who would bring me coffee in the waiting room all the time. You know, like just even those little acts of love, just beautiful.
Now, let me ask you a tough question. You know, whenever we're involved in a tragedy, sometimes people want to place blame. Did you, you know, during those 9 days especially, was there any of that? Like, was it tension in your marriage or with your in-laws because you're at your in-laws' house? Was there this desire on anyone's part to kind of, why weren't you watching her? I thought you were watching her. Did you guys struggle with any of that?
You know, not at first. Not at first. But I could tell you this, that I have wrestled with, just personally, internally, thinking of the day that I'm going to have to really talk to Joy about this when she's old enough now, and have conversations like, hey, you were in my care and I lost you accidentally, but I lost you. And this is all that ensued from that. But I've never been blamed for it by my wife, or you know, we've never blamed our in-laws. So you know, I think we're blessed in that regard as well. You know, accidents do happen. It certainly wasn't intentional by any means. We were just out having fun, and
every parent,
like
parent looks away for 90 seconds, you know, 30, 60 seconds or 2 minutes. You know, this is all we've all done it. It's and in these moments. You know, I went on a business trip once, and I had a rule with my wife: is you don't go to the pool or the ocean when I'm not home. You just don't. We have too many kids, and you don't. And she called me, and she said, "Hey, I want to go to the pool with my friend. Can I go and bring the kids?" I said, "No, your friend's a flake, and I don't trust her. I don't, you know, she's a flaky person. No." Well, they went, and do you know, my wife went to go to the restroom at the pool. My wife has to call me that they're in the emergency room because my son, her friend who was supposed to be watching, I could never look that woman in the face again. My blood was so angry. And the 90 seconds, my wife went to the restroom, and then she had to call me and tell me I went, even though, you know, and I could tell you I was mad at my wife for a year. So and my son was, you know, he was fine. It was just one day in the emergency room, but that just, for a year, I was just boiling with anger. So I would have to imagine. So you're saying it wasn't your wife mad at you. You've just harbored sort of anger at yourself because you looked away for 90 seconds or 60 seconds or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it didn't, but by God's grace, your wife never was upset with you.
Not to this moment. When I get home, I'm going to ask her, though.
Yeah, well, you know, this is an important thing because we, you know, if a child gets leukemia, parents start blaming each other. I told you not to get Wi-Fi in the house, or you know, we look for when you know, God or nature, when these acts of God, what we call them, happen. Isn't it a strange human phenomenon where we look to blame? We always want to find blame, and you look to blame yourself, but that's not it. It's just you know, this is part of being a parent. I always feel for parents who even do things as kind of unthinkable as they leave their, you've probably heard of this, they leave the car seat on the roof of the car and they drive away.
Oh, my.
You know, I've done that with boots in the Army. I drove from my apartment to Schofield Barracks. My boots were on the top. I've done it with coffee. I could imagine people are addled with stress or with work or with life. We could all do these things. We can all do these things. We could all have 3 beers at a barbecue and then get in an accident that's tragic and think that those 3 beers or that third beer was what did it, right? And so many of us are walking around just addled with remorse and guilt. But of course, and even in your situation, there's no one should feel guilt. But I know that we talked about autism on a show earlier this week, and and parents of children with autism have a 90% divorce rate.
Yeah.
And so when you have these sorts of trials as couples, I think that's sometimes a big stress. But your wife, I've met her. She's so joyful and she's so lovely. So in this period, would you take turns? Would you fall down and she'd pick you up, and she'd fall down and you'd pick her up, or did you both stand strong, or did you both fall down? I mean, how many months was it until you got out of the hospital?
You know what? It was a month and a day. It was a miraculous, quick journey in the hospital. From that initial 6 to 9 months run that the doctors told us about, it was 31 days. We went from ICU to the neuro wing to the rehab wing, and then one day and when you're in the rehab wing, every Tuesday they would have a round table, all the doctors and the parents, and they give you an update, progress, what's hoped for in the upcoming week. So we went in for that meeting, and Joy was doing wonderful. I mean, she had to have all types of therapy going on all at the same time. And they said, we're going to release Joy on Thursday. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. I felt like almost like, you remember like when your children are born, specifically your first at the hospital? I don't know if you went through this, Jason, but it was like, I remember when my son Isaiah was born, I got the car seat and I put him in the car seat, and I asked my wife, Kristen, I said, Kristen, is this the right car seat? Because he was so tiny, in this big car seat. And I'm like, we really have to go home with him? And Nurse Nancy, you're not coming with us? Like, we're on our own, And that was like sort of the same feeling I had again, like, whoa, we're going home with Joy.
No, I
was ecstatic.
And you had that permanent smile on your face. No, I remember with my second daughter, it was a real challenge because I don't know why, but they had my ex-wife and my baby girl. I was in the military, so I was stationed at Schofield Barracks. This was at Tripler Army Medical Center, and there was an ICU for newborns and NICU or whatever you call it, and they were in one room where you actually had to walk through the ICU for the babies. And so there are all these just parents just broken, and I had to walk back and forth through them.
Oh.
And I remember just trying not to smile. I remember thinking
yeah.
And I remember I tried not to smile, and it felt weird. I couldn't. It was, I'm trying not to smile, and, I must have looked like the Joker, but I had this permanent smile on my face. And so this was like Joy's second birthday. What was the day that you came? Do you remember the day that you came home from the hospital?
No, I don't. What's funny, Jason, is there's certain things in my life. Like the other day, we had a birthday for one of our children, and I told the kid. I always tell kids the stories about like when they were born, like, hey, we were doing this, we did that. I finished like the story, and Kristen was like, "That was hope," and I was talking about grace. I was like, "Oops."
Oh, yeah, we all do that.
I remember the day, like, and what happened. I remember walking out just like what you just described. We had met everyone on the rehab floor, and they were there for various other tragic reasons, and people were there for months, and we were leaving in a week. And I had that same conflict inside, like, I am really happy right now, but I don't want to show it in front of all these people because they have a long-term stay. And, Kristen started a Facebook page, Pray for Joy, and really amazing, Jason. I mean, like the outpouring of the love and prayer that we got through Facebook and the community that was started. I think she had like 15,000 followers on it right now. I think she's still pretty active on it. Like, people send us some prayer requests, and we had people praying like from North America, South America, Europe, Italy, China. I have a priest friend who's undercover in China. He was offering mass up. My spiritual director, the same day that Joy drowned, the word had gotten to him. and he celebrated Mass, and he's a missionary priest in Peru. And he said at the time of the Eucharistic consecration, when he lifted up the host, he just started yelling out Joy's name. So we just had prayer from everywhere. And my brother-in-law is a priest, a wonderful priest. He celebrated Mass at her bedside for the first 7 days. The nurses and doctors would joke. They would say, "What is this, a chapel?" And my father-in-law was evangelizing the doctors and nurses, and it was a full blown.
Well, I've met your family, and like you just see the joy of our faith emanate from all of them, you know. And so I have to imagine that just lit up the hospital, and you know, it's probably something that they weren't used to seeing. But then again, that's the grace we have as a community, and that's why I wanted to have you on this week, because my good friend, and I don't know, you know, his cousins if their faith walk. I don't know. I'm actually they want to talk to you, by the way. They asked if I could.
Oh.
They asked if I could give your cell number to them.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Their son is still in the hospital. We're going to have their Caring Bridge link in the show notes. So if you guys are listening to this and you're moved by this and you want to support a family that's going through a similar struggle, and this is a young man he's an actor in theater and on Broadway, and because of COVID. I believe, you know, that I'm not sure if they even have health insurance right now, but if there's a family going through exactly what you went through, and I have it in the show notes, but people have gone through, so many of us have gone, unsadly, so many of us have gone through such similar things. And that, you know, of all the organizations in the world, one of the organizations I think is the most beautiful is St. Jude, because they stand with families in the midst of just the most incredible struggles, right? Like, you know, like you said, the worst thing is growing older than your children. You know, give me cancer. Let me get hit by a car. Let me drown in a puddle. The idea that any of this would happen to our child is unbelievable. When you talk about, you had people all over the world messaging you on your Facebook page. To me, we're a part of the most powerful, beautiful, secret society in the world, and that is parents. You know, those of us who are initiated into this sort of society of love that unless you have children, you don't know. You don't know. The whole world changes the moment you cut your child's umbilical cord. Just that's it. The whole world changes. How you see, you know, your commitment to the future, the commitment to making the world a better place, ordering your life around this creature that, you know, this little creature running around your house to make sure that they're safe and happy and filled with joy. And so when you have these parents from around the world praying for you and messaging you, that, you know, that's because they're in that society, and then they know, or even if they don't know, they can't imagine you're going through what is the unimaginable. So did Joy have is there going to be any struggles that she has? Is she struggling with anything now from drowning, or is it all gone? I mean, is she 100%?
Yeah, Jason, you know, I really give glory to God for all the details, all of his miraculous love and outpouring of grace, and his kingdom coming into our lives. Because I think about 9 months ago, maybe closer to a year now, we were playing, Joy and I just had this thought. There was nothing that was of concern to me, but I was just like, I'm not a professional, so I'm going to take her in and just get her evaluated. So I took her to a neuropsychiatrist. They did 4 days of testing on her. I came in a couple weeks later for the report, and there was this lady, psychiatrist. She was probably in her early 60s, and she said to me, I've read all of her charts. I've done all of the exams. And she takes off her glasses and she starts bawling, and I got a pit in my stomach. And she said, she's perfect. She's perfect. You've been given a gift. I've never seen anything like this. And I just was so thankful. Those words limp to express my thankfulness. But so she is a perfect Joy, perfect name for her, and she's perfect. So not only did she live, but she flourished, and we are so thankful. Like what you said about the divorce rate with the parents with children with autism. It's the same thing. It's in the high 90s. This firefighter, the chief firefighter, came. The whole squad, Jason. They were so amazed that Joy was alive and she was leaving that they all came to the hospital a couple days before we were discharged because they just wanted to see her. So all the firefighters, all the paramedics were there. Ron, the detective, was there, and the chief came up to me and he said, I've seen hundreds of drownings in the Phoenix Valley. I've never seen anything like this. And everyone I know, there's a stat like 97% of married couples get divorced when they go through trauma and lose a child. And so be thankful not only for Joy, but for your marriage as well. So there's so many things and so many levels of gratitude that I really could go on and on all day about.
What would you tell someone who's listening who went through this, begged God, and then lost their child?
I thought a lot about this, Jason, because when listening to our story, listening to Joy's story, there was some real profound acts of faith. There can be a temptation to think, oh, because of that level of faith, God then responded with this certain miracle. And so people can get very hard and disparaging upon themselves. If I had faith like that, I can't explain to you nor describe why me and Kristen were blessed the way we were. What I would tell parents who have lost a child is that my heart simply breaks for them. And I pray quite often for families that experience tragedy and trauma and sickness and loss, specifically of children. Life is really fragile, and there's some things that we just won't understand on this side. But I do know. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But I do know that the Father's there, the Heavenly Father's there. Jesus is mourning and weeping with us, because just like in your mission, Jason, for the most vulnerable, all of a sudden parents who don't think they're vulnerable become very vulnerable when their child gets sick or dies. And so what I would tell them is to grow closer to the Lord, try as best as possible not to become resentful or bitter or anger in their hearts, and that life is fragile, and I'm just one person, but my heart really goes out to families who go through that.
Well, and that's what you just said, is we're all vulnerable from time to time. We're actually vulnerable. We're all vulnerable whether we know it or not. And I just interviewed Carter Sneed from Notre Dame, from the DeNicola Center for Ethics and Culture, on his beautiful new book, What It Means to Be Human. And he says, that the law, really the premise of the book is the law has forgotten the body, and it just remembers the will. But it's the body that makes us vulnerable. And so the law was created. Law exists to remember the vulnerable. So when the law forgets the body, it forgets the vulnerable. And then we just have power battling power, tactics. And so, that's one thing.
Cascade of problems.
In a cascade of, we have a society that abandons the vulnerable, abandons love, beauty, family, friendship, solidarity. And, but I want to go back to the problem of pain. The one story that I think of in my life that I experienced close and up in person was Alejandro Monteverdi, who wrote the movie Bella and directed Bella and wrote Little Boy and directed Little Boy. Everyone needs to watch the movie Little Boy. It stars Michael Rappaport and Kerry Tagawa, and it's Alejandro wrote this script as a love letter to his father and to America as a Mexican immigrant. It's a beautiful film set during World War II. It's about a little boy whose father becomes a POW in the Philippines, held by the Japanese, who befriends the Japanese man, an elderly Japanese man played by Kerry Tagawa, because he sees this old man as the enemy. And he thinks, well, if I love the enemy, God will bring my father home. And I don't want to give too much away, but I will give this away. In the end, his father does come home, okay? But you think he's not coming home. And when we were making that film, you know, we were battling with, well, lots of fathers don't come home from wars, you know, and what does this mean? Well, do you know, you might not know, this story wasn't really talked about much in the news here in the United States, although it was a big news story in Mexico. Alejandro made this film for his father, who he loved so much. And while Little Boy was in theatrical release, Alejandro's father and brother in Mexico are kidnapped.
Oh my.
And the negotiations were going on with the kidnappers. And of course, like Little Boy, like Pepper Busby, Alejandro Monteverdi is begging and pleading with God to get his father back. And it looks like his dad and his brother are coming home. The trade is going and everything is going perfect. But in the end, they kill his father and brother, and he never sees them again. So it was like Little Boy in reverse, where in the movie Little Boy, he thinks his father's dead, but he comes home. And while this movie's in theaters, Alejandro's father, he thinks is coming home, but yet then is killed. Really a heartbreaking story. And I had Alejandro and I talked a lot about this. He fell into months and months and months of despair and anger. Could you imagine making a movie? God, I made a movie to show that what love and faithfulness does to you. This little boy loved you so much and his dad so much. You brought his father home. Do you hate me? Is this a joke? How could you do this to me? You do the same thing that happened to me. What are the odds of that? The same thing that happened to Little Boy happens to me, and the movie I made for you and your church, because he wanted to celebrate the priesthood as well, because obviously the priest, the priesthood is being battered in the media. Well, all this is going on. Can you imagine the anger? And so I think all of us, at the end, we just have to know it's a mystery. It's a real mystery. And we live in a valley of tears, and we're surrounded by people that are addled with sorrow and suffering, and we should be kind and gentle and loving, because this is the world we live in. This is the economy of our world. Yeah. Have you had parents come up to you kind of angry and say, "Well, that's not my story," or ask you pointedly, "Why didn't God save my child?"
Yeah, I have, and unfortunately, I don't have any. I don't think really good answers.
I think the only answer I can think of is, it's a mystery.
Yeah.
It's a real mystery.
Yeah, life is fragile. It's very fragile.
Yeah, I think that is just the most important thing to remember, right? That we live in the brave new world. The brave new world is not coming, right? Like, we live there where life and death and birth and love, all of these real things are sort of compartmentalized and hidden from us. Even friendship, like real lively friendship, is just all sort of hidden from view. We live in a very sterile world. So then as happens, pregnancies erupt in when you didn't expect, or death breaks through when you didn't expect, or love and passion or real friendship, eros, friendship breaks in when you didn't expect. Reality has a way of kicking down the door, and some of it's beautiful and some of it's quite sorrowful, right? And and I think that we're not prepared for it as we used to be. Now, you being a brother who spent time in hospitals, that in even a way even prepared you, because you knew what to expect. You were praying, please, doctor, walk through that door.
Right. Yeah, and it's. I think it would be something that needs to be said too is like we really need to journey with one another, uh, especially those people who are find themselves in a very vulnerable situation, those who are hurting, those who are confused. We don't have to have all the answers, but we can give them our presence, and to really journey and walk with other people. There's sometimes I hear about, or have people contact me or my wife about horrific stories with children, and there's a natural sort of like repugnance, like whoa, like this is too heavy or too deep for me, and it really takes an act of courage to step forward and walk hand in hand with people during their toughest times. That's what Jesus wants us to do. That's what He did for us. So I think I'd be remiss if I didn't add this, Jason, too, is like that time in the hospital where my wife was staying over every night and just giving of herself. I would walk in, she'd be holding joy, caressing joy. Her love was heroic, and I'm so grateful for the way Kristen really loved Joy back to life. It was beyond words.
Well, and that's beautiful, and that's what strengthened your marriage. I want to go back to what you said about walking with people when they suffer. Carter Sneed on the show earlier in this week, you talked about the virtue of misericordia, and he defined misericordia as walking with people as they suffer, being with people when they suffer. And I after the interview, I'd looked up misericordia because I really didn't know the definition of that word, I must confess, until Carter gave it. Did you? Would you? I was like, misericordia, okay. I've heard it. Don't really know what that word means. But then again, I am a high school dropout. So I Googled it, and it said a misericordia was the weapon that was used to give someone the death blow on the field of battle who was dying. And so you would do it to a cohort who was dying. You would give them this misericordia, which obviously was a very hard thing. So in a pagan culture, quote unquote, mercy killing, but in the Christian sense, it's even more straining, right? It's mercy living. It's not giving someone the death blow, but to just be with people as they suffer. Sometimes just the best thing to do is just be and not talk. I have a dear friend, Miss Angela Perez Baracchio Gray, who's going to be coming on the show in a couple of weeks. She was the first Asian Miss America. First, she was Miss Hawaii. And when her brother committed suicide, she called me right when she found out. And she couldn't tell me what happened. She just cried for like a half hour before she could tell me what happened. And I kept saying, I didn't know what to say. And I just said, Angie, should I let you go? And she said, no, don't hang up. And then she couldn't get out the words. And I just sat there on the floor of my apartment listening to her cry for hours. It's a very hard thing to do, right? It's very hard to call your friend with depression. But this is what we're really this is what it is to be a human being, is to be with our family and our friends when they suffer. They will, I have friends who get mad at me when things are going great in their life. They'll say, you never call. Like, yeah, but I've been seeing you in the media. Like, you got a new movie. You got this, you got that. Things are going great. I bet your phone's ringing off the hook. Oh, yeah, it is. I'm like, well, when I see you in the Star and, embroiled in some scandal, I'll call you. How's that? Because your phone won't be ringing.
Oh my.
Right? Like, then I'll call you. But right now, you don't need me. You've got all the friends in the world. And
right.
I think that's how I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's really how we need to order our life, is to be with our family and our friends when they're struggling. That is what it is to carry the cross and to be a friend. And I know that you have had a great and beautiful education being with the CFRs. I just love reading Plato's dialogues. And the reason why is I like peeking in at beautiful friendships. You know, and now I'll do this has never been done before in the history of the world. I'm going to compare the movie Return to Me to Plato's dialogues. Have you ever seen Return to Me?
I don't think so.
Oh, it is a great movie. About a man who loses his wife in a car accident, who he just loves with all of his heart, and then another young woman who gets a heart transplant. Turns out it's this man's wife. But there are these scenes where my brain is freezing who the lead actress is right now, and I love her. I can't believe I'm forgetting her name. But anyway, she's got this Catholic father and grandfather and all of his friends, and they hang out in this bar and they just banter. They're just friends bantering, but they're always there with each other when they're struggling. You know, and that's what it is. You need this banter, this joy, this friendship, this lightening people's load as they carry their heavy burdens. That's when we are to be with people, right? Mm-hmm. And you know that. So were there any people, like any friends that you look to that during this trying time that sort of were models to you? You said, oh, you know how Josh was with me with Joy. I have to remember that. He taught me how to be a friend. Did you have any folks like that in your life?
Oh yeah, you know, I was surrounded by love, and during that time when Joy was in the hospital and the time afterwards, I was surrounded by so many great people. And I mean, I remember specifically, like, my best friend, Father Isaac. He's a missionary Franciscan in Ireland, and I just had gotten out of the questioning. Kristen was in the room with the doctors, and I called him up, and I just remember crying with him. And all he could do was cry with me. He didn't have any words that could alleviate the pain or the suffering that I was going through, but he could cry with me, and that was beautiful.
He walked with you in your suffering. He was there with
Yep.
you. He became one with you. It's a type of beautiful communion.
Yep.
That's what friendship is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this is one thing, and this show is growing. We have knitted together a community of folks from all over the world. Every time I check, there are listeners in every continent except Antarctica. We've not cracked Antarctica yet. And most countries, there are always people listening, and it's been striking to me. And I know they're of all different faiths, but what they share is really, the show is people are finding the show have a radical love, and they live beautiful lives of solidarity. But as someone who was raised an atheist in sort of a stripped down, broken down family, you know, not even my mother and father were never really married, never lived in the same house. I think they were married. They were teenagers, like 16, 17. Never lived in the house. Maybe knew two cousins by name. Saw them twice in my life. Never went to church. Really had no sort of community growing up. And what that meant was, I never had a lot of tragedy. Didn't see a lot of death because I didn't love or know a lot of people. You know what I mean? Didn't have a community.
Right.
Didn't have a lot of weddings or parties either, right? Just sort of one endless TV dinner, watching, you know, movies on a TV tray sort of childhood. But when you have a strong faith and a strong community, it's endless weddings, parties, and sadly funerals, right? You find out that it's not just the birthdays and the weddings, and it's a lot of tragedy. And so, you know, with my big, beautiful community, and I got this email or phone call from my Army buddy that he was going through this, I wanted to have you on. I'm going to have him on right after I let you go to talk about his nephew and his cousin and how we can help. And by the way, anyone who's a part of the Jason Jones Show community around the world, if you ever want to come on, maybe even do a Saturday show to talk about your ministry or your neighborhood or your community, just let me know. Message me at jason@movie2movement.com or through the show, and we will find the time and we will make the space. What would you say, just sort of as last words to folks that may have to go through this, And by the way, we're all going to go through some tragedy in our life unless we get hit by a bus tomorrow or today. You know, we're all going to experience these trying, hard times. What's the one thing that you learned through this experience with Joy that you would like to share with others?
You know, Jason, that's a great question. I think it was, I was in Hebrews this morning. It was chapter 11, and Paul says something to this effect. Faith is a confident assurance concerning what we hope for and conviction about things we do not see. That part about conviction about the things we do not see, like when you're going through it, there's a lot of things that you don't see. But reach out, don't isolate, hope, have that faith, and do your best to love. Don't ask necessarily why. Why is not the question, but what. What and how can I love better? How can I be heroic in this moment? That's what I would say to him. Be heroic. Be strong for your loved ones.
So this experience taught you how to love better.
Oh, without a doubt.
Well, brother, I want to thank you. And I want to ask you a favor. I'm going to have this show up. If you can maybe share it on your Facebook page, and we can share Asher's GoFundMe as well, and get this family some love. I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know you listen to the show too, so that means a lot to me. Make sure you give us 5. Have you given the show 5 stars yet? We need 5 stars.
I sure have.
We're a 5-star podcast. We want to keep it that way. There have been some trolls trying to knock it down. We are still at 5 stars. 5. You know what hurts more than 5 stars is the 3 stars. Because you're like, this person actually gave thought. They were like, nah. The 1 star's like, I hate this guy. And then I assume it's because of their problems, not mine. But when it's 3 stars, which I've been getting some of those lately, I'm like, I got to improve the show. I'm getting some 3 stars.
Can you get no stars?
No, it's 1 to 5. We are a 5-star podcast, one of the highest rated podcasts. And there are not a lot of 5-star podcasts around. And we're in the top 1% of podcasts in the world with downloads. The show is growing, and it just encourages me to grow and more and more and more so we can do things like this. There's a day. I hope there's a day that comes on where someone says, hey, we have a GoFundMe for this family. Their house just burned down. I'm like, come on the show. We'll for sure get it funded, right? Joe Rogan has you on. Your show is for sure funded.
Joe Rogan, he hasn't called me yet, but I'll go on.
No, but I'm just saying I would go on too. Hey, Joe, give me a call first, though. I want to be first in line. So Matt's a great guy, but have me – no. But, that's my goal is to keep growing the show. And when you give us 5 stars and you rate and review, it grows the show. So when we bring folks on like we do from the different organizations or different causes like this, we get them funded. And that's really my hope. And but we are growing rapidly, and that helps. So thank you. I know you always text me, I listen to this show. So thank you very much. But more importantly, thank you for the empathy that was birthed in you through this tragedy. Thank you for being open to share about it, because I know it's hard. It has to be very hard to even think about this. These are the things that we don't even want to have to think about. But then when we hear of other people suffering in a similar way, we know, as I know, that, for example, Asher's parents, you're the only guy in the world that can, or people who've gone through what you've gone through can talk to them. So I'm going to actually give Asher's dad your contact information, so look for that call. And I'm going to have Carl Bevins, my Army buddy, on to tell us about his nephew and how people can help.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Jason. It was a real blessing.
All right, Matt Lobod, I'm looking forward to when we can have ramen and Coca-Cola again.
It'll be a great day.
Is there anything better than ramen and Coca-Cola?
It was pretty good.
Did you have the spicy ramen? Do you remember?
I had the spicy ramen, yeah.
That's what you got to have. That's what you got to have. All right, brother. Look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Jason. God bless you.
God bless. All right, guys. We are going to have I'm going to try something very technical. I'm calling my Army buddy right now to talk about Asher. I'm calling him right this very second, and I'm trying to do it so you don't hear the phone ring. I don't know if I'm that fancy. Carl Bevins.
Hello. Hey, Jason Jones.
Hey, Hey, I wanted to call you without having the phone ring on the air, and I think I did it. I didn't think I was up to the challenge. So, brother, I just had my friend on, Matt Lobod, who went through exactly with what your cousin's going through right now, and so we're going to connect them. But
Oh, great!
you
That would be amazing.
my friend had a miracle, and his daughter Joy was a month in the hospital, a month and 1 day, and now she just had a cognitive scan, and everything is 100 percentile. She has no permanent damage, and we know life is a mystery. Can you tell us about, we don't know where Asher's going from here. Can you tell us about your cousin? Tell us about, I guess this was your nephew, and let us know what happened.
So, as you know, COVID hit everybody, right? So they've been out of work for a year, and, Jake was just going out to hustle up work to, support his family. And their 15-month-old son, Asher, followed him out the door, split second away from his parents. And the next thing you know, he had fallen in a pond, and his mom, Fran, found him unresponsive, no vitals, nothing. Screamed for help. They were able to revive him at the hospital. At this point, he has not completely woke up. It's March 3rd is when this happened, but they have removed the ventilator, and he's breathing on his own. And that's about as far as they've gotten so far.
And so do we know, is there any permanent damage? Is it, what's the?
We don't know. The MRIs came back with some damage, but it's unknown how extensive it is.
Okay. And now Asher's dead. He's an actor, correct?
Entertainer.
Dancer. Okay, and he was on Broadway?
He was traveled with Wicked, yeah.
Oh, okay. So what we're going to do, brother, is, we're going to put the caring tree in the show notes, and I'm asking everyone to support that. It means the world to me.
Amazing.
And
they can use all the help they can get.
Yeah, there's a world. My audience this is a very giving audience, and I hope that you folks can give to this. Carl, I want to talk. You're my brother. We met when I was 17 years old. How old were you?
I think I was 18.
You were 18, and where did we meet?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Fort Benning, Georgia. We were, and then we were in a cohort unit.
Yep.
So we were in the Army together. I want to ask you. I want to change topics real quick. There was you had said something to me once, years after we got out of the Army, that you saw me. I mean, I changed. And I changed in basic training. There's like two Jason Joneses.
Oh, yeah.
And the one died forever in Fort Benning. And you were there. And I never thought anyone even noticed it or saw it. And it was striking to me that while I'm even doing the show and having you on, it came from a phone call that I got in Fort Benning. And you, without me even saying anything to you, you were saying you were a different guy the day after that. Can you talk to me about that?
I remember that specifically. I remember they gave us phone privileges, and you had just gotten the news from your girlfriend that her father had made her essentially have an abortion and kill your baby. I remember it was a complete 180. Yeah, you completely changed. I mean, you were wild. You were a wild man in boot camp.
So what was
it's an amazing story where you've come.
Well, where was I? So when you say, what was I like the day, like before the abortion and after this?
I remember you being a very tough kid. Very tough kid. Physically strong. And, didn't take any crap off anybody. And to this day, you don't really, but you just change. For the rest of boot camp, you were kind of a little more solemn for a while, but you weren't. It was just different.
Yeah. When we graduated basic training, we were all sitting around a bonfire. We had the best drill sergeants in the world, Drill Sergeant Phoebus and Drill Sergeant Thomas. And I remember you making fun of me as we were sitting around the fire saying I would always wake up singing Bryan Adams songs or something like that. I remember you saying
something
that.
crazy. I know it was kind of some weird stuff.
So we were lucky that we were a part of a cohort unit, which I don't think the military did for very long, which is we were all very young, 17, 18 years old. We went to basic training together, and then we got to spend 3 years together in Hawaii.
We spent our whole time together. Yeah, that was great. I think it was great for bonding. You know, there's a couple people that I call friends. I can, a handful on one hand that are real friends, and that, 3 of them are from there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember me, you, Jamal, Darby, and it was not just the training, but we were the ones, and especially our sort of little clique, where we always were. You were a surfer, so I think you might have just joined the Army to surf in Hawaii. Is that correct?
Essentially, yeah, pretty much.
And I know that was Darby's
and that was
Jamal's.
definitely Darby and Jamal's thing. They were really good at it.
They're good surfers, better surfers than you.
Oh, far better. Oh yeah, hands down.
Oh really? Yeah, I remember.
Oh yeah, Darby had no fear of anything. He was an animal out there. No matter what waves were out there.
Yeah, and then O'Grady. Do you remember O'Grady?
Yeah, I remember him too.
And our unit was filled with tough kids, right? Like O'Grady was this tough Irish, Cuban kid from Miami who was pretty aggro, pretty tough.
Oh yeah,
but loved to surf. I mean, he was a great surfer, and he was very adamant. I joined the Army so I can surf in Hawaii, and there were, I think, a lot of guys end up at Schofield Barracks for that.
Yeah.
Well, brother, you are my brother. You are my friend. We have been walking together since we were 17 years old, and you've even helped me with sort of the COVID nonsense. Share with everyone what you discovered was going on in California that was just unbelievable. I thought you really got it wrong until you sent me the pictures. And then because of you, we got it to Alex Jones, and then it became a national news story. He shared it, and then it went all over the world. Share folks what you discovered, which is, earlier this week I had on a woman who found out that they were sending COVID. She was on Fox News, and this week, and she discovered that they were sending COVID positive patients to group homes, with young adults with intellectual disabilities. You discovered something almost as bizarre in California. Took pictures, sent it to me, and we got it.
The military was doing it. There were uniformed military men, and they were doing COVID stations at an elderly home, an assisted living elderly home.
Yeah, so they were,
which I thought was crazy.
In your community, they had put COVID testing sites in the parking lots of old folks' homes for everyone in the community to drive to and get tested.
Yeah. Of all places that a potentially contaminated person can go to get tested was a assisted living home for the elderly. It was insane.
Yeah, no. So when you told it to me, and I was like, okay. As much as I accidentally launched the Film Your Hospital movement in February of last year when I went to a COVID testing site that I was told had hours-long lines and this and that. And I got there, and there was no testing, no lines, and they were sending everyone home. And it was a joke. Filmed it, went uber viral. Even after seeing all of that, when you called me and said, Jason, they're setting up COVID testing sites in old folks' homes, I'm like, Carl's seeing this wrong. No way. That's not happening. Because this was in August, I think.
I can't remember something like that.
Yeah, it was late.
I was like, dude, it's real. Let me take pictures.
Yeah, no, you got them to me. I got them to Alex Jones. Alex Jones put it on the air, and then I think that station got shut down the same day or the day after. Just,
of course.
Yeah, really dumb. Really dumb. All right, brother.
Yeah, I still think. But yeah, hey, thanks for calling me, Jason, and thank you so much for sharing this. I mean, these are just young kids, just starting out in life, and this tragedy. And if they go to the Caring Bridge site, Asher Bevins, there's a testimonial there that they can read about and see some pictures of him, and it's heartbreaking.
I'm going to put it in the show notes. It's a young dancer, very talented. You say they're a young couple. How old are they?
I think they're like 30.
And what's
starting out in life.
What's Asher's parents' names?
Fran and Jacob Bevins.
Fran and Jacob, and they are your
cousins. Well, Jacob's my cousin. Francesca's his wife.
Okay, Francesca and Jacob. All right, we're going to pray for Francesca and Jacob and Asher, and I'm definitely going to go on here and make a donation. I'm jumping in the car. I have to drive to Dallas. I'll be speaking at the Bishop's Dinner in Dallas and today. So I have to jump in the car, but as soon as I get to my hotel, I'm going to go in there and make a donation, brother, and do me a favor, keep me up to date, and then I'll keep the Jason Jones Show audience. And, you're going to have – Carl, as I'm talking to you, I'm looking at where people are listening to the show right now. And we're in all continents but Antarctica, in most countries in the world. So you're going to have people praying all around the world for your nephew. And we'll see which kind of support we can get you.
No, pray a miracle would be amazing.
We're praying for a miracle, brother.
Yeah, that's what we want.
We're praying for a miracle.
Well,
God is
so
good.
much,
all right, brother. Thank you.
All right, take care.
All right, guys, this has been a deep cut episode of the Jason Jones Show, Saturday special. There really are no sponsors for the Saturday shows, so it's for me to do whatever I want to talk about, And today, really, my sponsor is Asher. I want you to go to the Caring Bridge in the show notes. We have a growing audience. If all of us were to go there and give a couple bucks, it would fund completely their work. Also, if you're a part of the Jason Jones Show audience and there's a show you want us to do for an organization, a cause, a family on a Saturday episode, message me, Jason, at movie2movement.com or through the show sites, wherever you're listening, message us. And we will try to get you on the schedule because the Jason Jones Show is my goal when I started this was to knit together a tribe of people radically committed to serving the vulnerable, and I want to find our tribe, and we're finding people all over the world. I'm loving all the beautiful messages. I never ask for to rate and review. I got to keep telling me, Jason, you got to ask. If you don't ask for the 5 stars, you're not going to get the 5 stars. You're not going to remember. So give us 5 stars, write a review, go in the show notes, and let's show Asher some love. Until next time, I got some big guests coming up. I cannot wait. We're going to have a very special Easter. We're going to have a very special Easter special. It doesn't roll off the tongue. We're going to have an Easter special. It's going to be amazing. Maybe that sounds a little better. All right. Until next time, it's the Jason Jones Show.
This has been the Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.